All right, No Damn's Given podcast, episode next, and I'm here with Nikki.
Nikki.
Do you have a last name?
No, it's just Nikki. No, I'm just kidding. Miller. It's Miller.
No, Nikki Miller. Awesome. So, tell me about, what do you do?
Well, I'm a nurse.
Because I run your business, but
That's true.
I'm really not
That's
sure
true.
I know what you do.
It involves needles and beauty, which is Botox, Juvederm, laser hair removal, laser tattoo removal for all your tattoo regrets. Just about anything except for the surgery. I don't do that.
Is there a tattoo regret?
There is.
Yeah. Do you have a tattoo?
I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. So we're actually waiting on a guest, and before we start, I realized I haven't sat here and talked to Nikki before.
I don't know how
she's
he's
been
missed
here.
that all this
we
time.
just haven't discussed what she does. She actually works for me at the Georgia Center Med Spa. Go Georgia Center.
That's right.
We have our medical director is Dr. Josh Groves, who went to medical school with me and then did general surgery residency with me, and then went and did a hand surgery fellowship, and then went and did a plastic surgery fellowship.
I had no idea. A hand surgery
I know.
fellowship?
He is
Wow.
he's like so overeducated.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a brainy guy.
Most laid back person I may have ever met.
Yeah.
Very
Brilliant guy. And so a few years ago, how long? We've been open 3 years?
3 going on 4, I believe.
3 going on 4 years ago. I'm not sure exactly how it started, but someone came to me with the idea of the med spa. And I did not, I knew I could run the business part of it, but didn't want to be in charge of the medical part of it. So I called Josh.
But why not?
Because I'm a vascular surgeon. and so, that's a good question. Why not? So maybe there are a lot of people doc in the box type things. And actually, here comes Dr. Owor.
Oh, here he is.
Very good.
Yay.
We'll start with something very different because today we're going to do beauty and math. So who knew?
That's right.
Yeah. So that was a good question. She asked me. So when we were starting the med spa, someone had come in to me with the idea of doing it, and I'm a vascular surgeon. And I said, well, if my wife was going to a med spa, I really wouldn't want a vascular surgeon to be the doctor in charge. I think it should be a plastic surgeon. And so I called my friend who is a plastic surgeon. And I said, well, there's this idea, and there's these ladies here who want to do this, and you be in charge of the medicine, and I'll be in charge of the business part of it. And of course he agreed, and that's sort of how we got here. And so Josh comes in and he oversees or does or trains or what exactly did he do?
Well, he comes in and he sees patients sometimes. Like if we have patients that have kind of any kind of different kind of issue that we aren't used to actually dealing with, or even any questions with plastic surgery or anything like that. And he oversees all our protocols to make sure that, everything's safe. And he even shows us a few of his tricks as far as how he injects Botox and Juvederm and things like that. So
yeah,
he kind of keeps us sharp.
Very good. And so as far as procedures and stuff, have y'all had any training in what you're doing, or y'all just
years and years of training? Yes. We just finished another master course with Allergan, and actually, you talked about math and beauty. The instructor there talked to us about the golden ratio. Have any of you ever heard?
Yes.
You've heard of that? And so
hey, pull that microphone. You really have to eat it to get it. Yeah.
Yes.
So, what is the golden ratio?
Well, the golden ratio is a mathematical ratio. It's a mathematical ratio.
Yeah, he's making sure you're here with us.
Yes, but beauty and mathematics, all beauty is mathematical.
Yeah?
Because in order to see beauty, you have to see symmetry.
Yeah?
You have to see harmony. You have to see balance.
Mm.
You have to see all kinds of properties.
Mm-hmm.
And those properties, even shades, shadow versus light, and all those things are mathematical. So the golden ratio is just one of them, yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, mm-hmm.
So, are you ready to go to the med spa?
Yes, I think I'll give it a try.
Consultations are complimentary.
You guys introduce yourselves.
Well, my name is Dr. Robert Stephen
You
Owor,
really have to pull that thing towards you. Yeah. there you
and I teach computer science at Albany State University.
go. Yeah. Very good.
Yes, and Tracy, my wife, is here. Tracy is a regional manager for Shoe Station.
Awesome, Tracy.
Tracy, Doc, glad to have you. Both.
And I love your glasses, Tracy.
Thank you.
Very nice.
So, if you ever gone to a med spa or had a day spa treatment?
A day spa treatment, but not a med spa. So
Not a
that's
med
something
spa.
I'll be looking forward to doing.
We have
Very
massage
good.
therapy. We have 3
Yeah.
massage therapists.
Okay, wonderful.
Very good. Well, one of the things. So how did I and Dr. Owor meet? So we were actually working on an application together, and I got to talking to him and decided that he was a smart. I don't want to seem I don't want to seem whatever when I say this, but he's so smart. I thought he was like different than I was. I mean, he's like that smart. And so I've been around a lot of smart people, but like the whole computer thing is it's brilliance personified.
Mm-hmm.
So the computer revolution, when's that coming? Not the the AI revolution, and there's a specific date that they said that the world could possibly end because computers are going to be so smart they'll outsmart us. Are you worried about that?
I am not too worried about that because we will always control computers.
Yeah.
Yes, I know they can be very smart. A point will reach where they make their own decisions,
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
and they'll be able to empathize and to feel and to
That's
analyze and to make all these decisions. But I think that since we've created them, we will always have what we call a trapdoor.
Right.
So a trapdoor is a secret path that you have to any computer to be able to disable it, to disrupt it, or to otherwise disengage it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you see they'll be able to perceive, what do you mean by that? I mean, what does it mean to perceive if you're not conscious? So are you saying that computers will be conscious?
Computers will have artificial consciousness, yes. There are several developments taking place in the computer field, and artificial intelligence is going to depend on quantum computing in the future. So the quantum computer is going to use light as its mechanism of communication, as opposed to electrons. Now, electrons have certain properties. First of all, they travel at about 225 meters, 1,000 meters per second, while light travels at 300 million miles per second. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge order of magnitude in the difference in speed. Electrons travel in a serial manner, while light travels in a parallel manner. So when several photons of light are emitted, if one light photon goes, the second one will never catch up with it. For thousands and millions of years, that photon will always be ahead because light travels at an absolute constant speed.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Now, the second thing is that light is parallel, meaning that it can do several things in an instant, while electrons do things serially. Mm-hmm. So because of that, the quantum computer is going to be able to interpret things like emotions, things like, what I call
feelings.
Yes, feelings, psychological and neurological aspects of human beings. So because of that, in addition to the computational capabilities, it will be very powerful. And so it will be able to make decisions just like human beings.
Wow.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But that is in the future. Mm-hmm.
So I want to try to understand something.
Mm-hmm.
And so Boolean logic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Boolean and the mathematics that he came back that he came up with was written in the 1800s, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so are computers still based on the simple principle of yes, no questions, and is it if-then statements?
Yes.
And maybe you could expand it, because I know I'm dumb when it comes to that, but I actually have his paper, which is beautiful. I mean, the math in his original publication, because I like to. One of my odd habits is collecting old papers, like Einstein's paper, his original papers on relativity.
Yes.
And so Boolean's paper, but it's it's brilliantly simple.
Yes. It's very simple, and he had 8 simple rules. And the first rule would be just affirmation, that something is. And the second one is negation, something is not. And those 2 statements look very simple, but one philosopher said, "I think, therefore I am,"
right?
To mean that they are conscious. And the existence theorem is an interesting result of that. That does something really exist, or it does not? Does God exist, or does he not? And
right.
you can go into a lot of discussion on that issue. So, and then beyond that, we go into conjugation, which is one thing is true and the other is true as well. And that could make a third truth. And then you have, of course, disjunction. One thing is either this or that. And in that you could have, it is exclusively either this or that, or it is inclusively either this or that. With inclusive, it means that 2 things could be true at the same time, while exclusive, only one can be true. And those are really the 8 basic Boolean rules, and you can make billions of combinations of statements based off that.
So all of and I'm asking this question because I'm ignorant, all of computer engineering are still based on that principle.
Still based on that principle.
So to me, and this is like all science, and this is what I was trying to explain to my son who's taking chemistry. Like, we built, like, everything that I know is built on the things that people learned before me. So I was thinking about what we were talking about today, and I'm assuming that computer science is very simple first they built the very simple parts of that, which were a calculator, like a calculator. Yes. And then somebody stood on their shoulders and took that language and then built a more powerful calculator.
Yes.
And then we had the scientists, if anybody's seen the movie, The Thinking Game. Is it The Thinking Game?
The Thinking Machine.
Where they were, they were deciphering the Nazi codes.
Yes.
And they built the first, I think they built it in England, the first computer.
Yes.
And so is how a lot of what you do in computer science, is it similar to what we do in regular science, where you take parts? So they've already taken the code that goes up to this point, and then you add to that. Is that a good way to look at it, or is it more complicated than that?
Yes, a good way to look at it. And what is interesting is that the first modern computer was built by a gentleman called Charles Babbage. And nobody was interested in that computer. He built it in the 1800s, except one lady, Lady Ada Byron, Countess of Lovelace in England. And she was a brilliant mathematician. We consider her to be the first software engineer. And so she was the only person interested in the work of Charles Babbage. Unfortunately, the plague, she got tuberculosis and she died.
Oh my God. And
Charles Babbage was so depressed. He actually died. I think he had a few other issues, and he died because of that depression, I think. And this machine remained in a museum for close to 100 years. When, during the Second World War, it was rediscovered. And it is on the basis of that discovery, and it was a mechanical computer, but it had all the elements of the modern computer. So in the 1940s, the first electronic computer was built in the United States. And you can read the history. It's very much associated with the atomic bomb, the development of the atomic bomb, and the calculations that were required. But that was the first electronic computer. But it was based on the works of Charles Babbage and Lady Ada Byron. John von Neumann is key to the development of the modern computer. He designed the architecture of the central processing unit as we know it, the memory, and the peripherals which are connected. And since his development, almost every computer is a variation of the John von Neumann architecture. So John von Neumann is another brilliant scientist who has made tremendous contributions.
So do I understand it correctly? So when they say that you're increasing the power, I'm getting a more powerful computer, or I'm getting a bigger, better computer, that really what they're talking about, well, they're talking about a couple of things. Number one is the processing speed, its ability to move through computational things, but it's also talking about the ability to store really ones and zeros, right?
Yes.
Everything is about either a affirmative or a
negative.
Or a negative.
Yes. 0 or 1, on or off, North Pole or South Pole. So we can actually represent every signal that the five senses allow us to see on a computer, and we use all the various forces of nature. But in a simplified form, we could use on or off, we could use 0 or 1, we could use the North Pole and South Pole in a magnet. So as long as we have that polarity, the binary nature, we can always do a computer representation. And that's why memory, for instance, magnetic memory is stored using North and South Pole. If you have an optical memory, it's just a series of ons and offs, and so on and so on. So it looks very simple, but we can represent everything, representing 0, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, and we can represent sounds, we can represent pictures, all using bits and bytes. And a bit is nothing but a binary digit, a 0 or 1, and a byte is just 8 of those. And then if we have 1,000 of them, we say it's a kilobyte. If we have 1,000,000, we say it's a megabyte. And if it's 1,000,000,000, we say it's a gigabyte.
The gigabyte.
So when I move through thinking about where we're going with this as far as artificial intelligence, I go to neurology.
Yes.
With something that I understand a
Yes.
little bit. I'm a vascular surgeon, but I understand. But neurology also always fascinated me, and I probably was pretty close to could have been a neurosurgeon. My and the cross-sectional architecture of, when I was studying about this, the cross-sectional architecture of neurons is a lot of what we used or a lot of what was used to create the neural net or neural. That's not what it's called. I think that's what it's called in the movies. But the artificial intelligence processors.
Yes.
And so the way neurons work is they answer yes or no questions by allowing gates to open and the flow of information, or not allowing the flow of information. So you can think about that as the affirmative or the negative.
Yes.
Or the not affirmative.
Yes.
But then there's another thing. So we have this in neurology. There are preferred pathways and there are unpreferred pathways.
Yes.
And we talked about this a little bit in the processing of AI.
Yes.
Because what you do, if I understand it correctly, is you move a bunch of information through a different pathways, and
Yes.
then the engine will find the preferred pathways, and
Yes.
then if you want to tweak it a little bit, you sort of tweak those to where it goes through the preferred pathways.
Exactly.
Am I explaining that good or?
You're explaining it pretty good. And we borrow a lot from neuroscience, from neurology, and brain science. So we know, for instance, that the brain has a series of neurons, and neuron is a brain cell, and those neurons are connected to each other using synapses, and that messages are sent from one neuron to another. And sometimes one neuron sends messages to several neurons at the same time.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just one message. And also, those messages are different. So, and I think it is electrochemical in the brain, but it is different. So we have used that understanding to also to design neural networks, which are artificial intelligence systems. And those neural networks, we send messages to solve different problems, just like the brain does. And we've also specialized where we have a brain and we have what might be like the spinal cord, so that the intelligence is distributed. For instance, I do not need to touch a hot thing and then say, gee, it is really hot. It might be a great idea to move my hand. Yes, because there is a reflex action that once it's hot, I immediately move my hand.
Right.
It doesn't have to travel all the way to the brain. The reflex action will take place. So similarly, we can have local intelligence on a computer to solve a local problem without going back to, say, a bigger computer that is like the brain.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is it where it can learn from experience, perhaps?
Yes.
Like patterns and recognize
Yes.
that?
Yes. So when it comes to learning, again, we borrow a lot from neurology and psychology. We know, for instance, and there's a lot of studies that has been done from early childhood all the way to adulthood. We know that children begin learning just by observation, and say, oh, there's a cat, it's a tree, it's a dog, so that is observation and affirmation. And that is not my toy. This is not Barbie. I don't want that. So they're already negating, So that is one level, observation, and the second one is contradiction or negation. And then the third level is deduction. Now they say, my cat loves this food and this other food, but not the other one. So they're able to conclude, So there's deduction. And then induction is where you have patterns. So all of a sudden you start seeing them singing repeated songs. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb, and they repeat. But so you have induction, which is another level. And then you move on to inference. Inference is where things don't always happen all the time, but they happen certain times.
Mm-hmm.
So the children will know, for instance, that the ice cream man comes on Thursdays. So they'll ask mommy for $2 to buy ice cream, The other days, the ice cream man doesn't show up. And then there is what is called recursion, which is a sequence of actions resulting in something. For instance, I might not, my brakes may not fail today, but if I don't change those brakes over a 4-year, 5-year, 6-year period, they're going to fail, because it's wearing over a period of time.
Wear and tear.
Yes, wear and tear. So that is a recursive action. And then the last stage of intelligence is the abstraction stage. And that's where computers are having a challenge. So a computer can, for instance, cook a specific recipe by a master chef, but that master chef can create a new sophisticated recipe. But the computer cannot, by itself at this point, originate a new sophisticated recipe. It can imitate or even vary a recipe that is known, but it cannot say, or compose music, just come up with a new song, So it could, through some random process, but the beauty elements, as we said, everything is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So it might create harmony, and it may be synchronized, it may be balanced, and so on. But so it's an area of debate, yes. But certainly computers can make decisions at this point, yeah. They can look at a set of facts and use deduction, induction, inference to make decisions and take action, yeah. So we've gone far, but we've not gone far enough yet.
But it can't come up with a new idea on its own.
It can come up with new ideas at what we call the lower levels of abstraction.
Right.
For instance, let's say, and I like the recipe, let's say I know how to make curry, give me a name of a dish. Curry chicken. And then I can make a variation of that curry chicken, which is really good. A computer could also do that by adding more curry or ginger or something, you know.
So I have this idea of the conceptualization of consciousness and how, and so everybody's worried about, even my daughter is worried about this time when computers will, quote, be smarter than us and will reach this sort of conscious stage. But I point to the idea that humans reached this conscious stage, you know, let's say 100,000 to 700,000 years ago. Okay, so we've been conscious for a certain amount of time where you would say, oh, that's a person,
yes,
as opposed to whatever was before that. And even with, and so people are like, oh, well, it'll just read all the books in the world and then it'll suddenly, that's not really how consciousness works. It'll probably look at whatever created it and go, what are y'all doing? You know, why am I here? You know, what, you know, I see we've got all this, you know, it's, I don't see it suddenly trying to read everything that has ever been amassed. I mean, you know, it's a funny thought, and maybe I think of it and it's hard to conceptualize something that has such a more powerful processing unit than we do. Well, that brings up a really a very interesting point.
Yes.
And so, as human beings, we interpret the world through a context.
Yes.
And we have to have a context to be able to interpret the world.
Yes.
And so that context for us who were brought up in South Georgia is religious.
Yes.
So we call that a religious context, and then
Yes.
that's how we filter the information that we get, and then we process that.
Yes.
So in some way, and we do that through senses and feeling, emotion. We do that through logic.
Practice.
Yeah. But that structure determines what our morality is.
Yes.
And in some ways, it's impossible to determine what that is because it's not a constant.
Exactly.
And so building that by, and so we determine those things by interacting with each other.
Yes.
And so that's a very interesting question.
Yes.
Will these entities, they will have to interact with their surrounding entities to form that, to be able to make those decisions. And so here's the moral question on top of that, which is you can't really, to me, you couldn't really have something that goes out and does it that hasn't been, and maybe that's the question and the issue that we would all have, is if you're not a part of our moral structure system, meaning our religious structure, our social structure system, if you're not religious, then just the moral social structure system, then these entities, even being conscious entities, if they're not a part of that, then they wouldn't be able to make those decisions based on how all of us would make them.
Yes.
And so
now there are a lot of research papers in this area, and you could train a computer to act like a Southern Baptist.
Oh, wow.
Because you give it the moral code of a Southern Baptist,
Yep.
the Alleluia and everything.
Yep.
So it makes decisions as a Southern Baptist and
Right.
lives in a community. You could even make that robot attend church on Sundays so it hears the message, you know.
Right.
So if they say that the Lord is risen, so now this computer knows the Lord is risen, hallelujah. Or you could teach it something else, you know. Now the question, and actually they'll be capable of imitating specific practices. Just like you could teach it to be a lawyer, to reason in a certain way, because we'll reach that level of intelligence. I think the bigger question is going to be, how do we govern these new entities?
Yeah.
Yes. And what do we teach them and what don't we teach them? Because I bet you, and I hate to say this, there are going to be a bunch of thieves who say, what if we trained these robots to rob banks?
In the wrong hands.
I'm sorry to say
yeah.
that. And then, yeah. And
well,
then,
in a way, it's already happening, right? Because we have, just to take your theory one step further, we already have bots that are on the internet that are constantly looking for weaknesses in different security systems.
Yes.
And as soon as they find a weakness, they infiltrate it.
Exactly.
Is that it? That's a true statement, right?
It is true.
And
yes.
so in theory, what you're saying is in a minor way in practice,
Yes.
just through computer programming and through that's a
Exactly.
certain type of intelligence, right? It's
Yes.
running its program, its algorithm,
Yes.
and once it finds the area in which it infiltrates, then it does it, and it lets whatever entity that's on the other end know.
Exactly. So just as we are going to create artificial intelligence systems for good, there are unfortunately some human beings who are going to create artificial intelligence systems that cause harm in society. And we have to work against them. We are already working against them now because the bad guys, the bad computer hackers are already developing.
Are you a good computer hacker?
Yes, yes. There are those who wear the white hat.
The white
hat, and there are those who wear the black hat. So the black hat guys are the bad guys, and the white hat guys.
I'm glad
are
I'm
the
on
good
your
guys.
team.
Yes. Yes. So we need to train a lot of our kids to get into all this, to get into artificial intelligence, analytics, blockchain, because we have no choice. It's like reading and writing. A time comes when those who cannot read are disadvantaged.
That's exactly
so
right.
a time is coming when those who do not know artificial intelligence
or programming,
or
understanding
yes,
these
yes,
things,
yes,
and, you know,
yes.
and it's woven its way into into all aspects. I mean, like now
yes.
medicine, it's
Yes.
completely computer driven.
Yes.
I mean, our computers shut down. We're done for the day.
Exactly.
And so that's, and I guess it's working its way in schools. It's just really slow.
In schools, in malls, in transportation systems. So it's going to, just think of the time, which is coming very soon, where you won't have to drive the car. You just sit in there and say, "Take me to the airport," and it will take you there.
We jumped way ahead when you walked in because I had some questions I wanted to answer. So how did you get here? How did you get to Albany? Your training and background. I mean, if I want my daughter to go into computer science. So what does she need to do to do what you're doing now?
What I'm doing now?
Yeah.
Well, if she's in, I would start about the 5th or 6th grade, because to prepare mindset is very important, and purpose. So it's like I want her to be able to appreciate computer science in a way that a kid would appreciate it. Say, I want to be able to fly drones. I want to be able to build a robot. I want to be able to do amazing things. I want to be able to
fly a spaceship,
fly to Mars.
That's right.
And so, how do I do that? So, you say, they learn the sciences, learn mathematics, appreciate mathematics. And I would like kids to appreciate math not through algebraic formulas and Latin words like gamma and alpha and beta and Greek,
right.
But through understanding math in simple ways, in natural ways, looking at the rainbow and wondering, like Einstein did and said, "Oh, gravity bends light. Why? Because the rainbow has a curvature, and what is making it curved?
Right.
There has to be a force that is bending it. And what is that force? And it's gravity.
Yeah.
You know, that is something that a kid would come up with.
That's right.
Yes. So so once they begin there, and then they begin to appreciate scientific thinking, establishment of truth and fact, and connecting facts, and discovering things, they will become great computer scientists, because computer science is about problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so that's where I would take them. But certainly at the more advanced level, they need mathematics.
Is it more math or is it more language? Is it a language understanding or is it mathematics understanding? I guess that's at its very basics, I know it's math because it's
Yes.
based on Boolean logic.
Yes.
So, but where programmers are at,
And
where they're really building on a lot of the things that other
Yes.
people have done.
yes.
Is it? Yeah,
And
maybe
the
that's
thing is that the way math has been taught, mathematics is a language. It is
Mhm.
a language
Well, that's true.
that describes
no doubt.
the universe. But unfortunately, because mathematics was begun, or the Greeks contributed greatly to it,
Mhm.
the Romans, the Egyptians, we go back to those symbols. And kids don't understand, gamma squared over alpha equals to delta minus 1. And so they say, what is this? But what I'm just saying is that something is turning, Something is turning, and then it turns again and stops. That's all I'm saying. But when I use gamma squared over this, it's very confusing. So if we can begin to describe the universe and the mathematics and the things that operate in the universe using modern language, things that people see and know, mathematics and computer science will become very easy.
Hmm.
So math is a language.
It is a language. It is a language.
That's awesome.
Just nothing but a language. Yes.
If I'd
Yes,
only
yeah,
known.
Yes. It's simply a language. And the way you manipulate a computer, you manipulate it through a language. And the truth is that computer languages are far simpler than natural languages because every statement has only one meaning. But if I say I'm bad, that doesn't mean I'm terrible or I'm fantastic.
Right.
Could be really cool if you're
Yes,
bad.
yes. So natural languages are more complicated. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about the Nexus program and how that's changing the university, and who should apply for that? And
Yes. The Nexus program, first of all, the Nexus Degree type is a new type of degree. Ever since the 1890s, when the University System of Georgia established degree types like the bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts. The degree of medicine is a type of degree.
Mm-hmm.
The degree of veterinary medicine, the degree in law, all these degrees. And you also have associate's degrees, and then you have master's degrees and PhDs. So all those types of degrees were defined by the University System of Georgia. So ever since the 1800s, they had not defined a new type of degree. So the Nexus degree is a new type of degree, and it is a degree which does not require you to add any more hours to the degree that you are already doing. So let's say I'm doing a degree in biology. I'm not going to have to do another so many credit hours to get a Nexus degree. No. All I do is take electives which amount to 6 credits or 18 credit hours. And you know that to do a degree, because of what we call the general degree requirements, you need to know if you know about Georgia history, U.S. government, sociology, psychology, whatever you're doing, you have to have a general understanding of this. So you pick out 6 hours and then specialize in something to an extent where you can be an expert in that area and do some internship and apprenticeship and become so good that when you graduate you can straight away go to work. So I'll give you an example. Supposing that you wanted to work in the stock market it requires you to know a couple of things. It requires you to know about finances,
Uh-huh.
about banking, different types of investments, like maybe invest in treasury bills or in stocks, bonds, foreign currency. So you need to understand all this. So what you might do is to take several hours in finance, accounting, blockchain, stock market, and investment, and then go work, say, at Wall Street for 6 months. Now, when you come out, somebody can hire you. Maybe a local bank here in Georgia can hire you and say, hey, you know what? We have $2 million in the bank. We want to put it in the stock market. So you say, hey, I know how to do that. And now you know how to do it. But that's a very risky one, right? You need a stockbroker. But that's an example of a Nexus Degree. You might do another one. Say IBM is a big company, and it does a lot of things. So, for instance, you might be handling shipping at a customs port. And there's this IBM computer that can tell you, hey, this product, you're going to tax so much. Oh, you brought in this other stuff? This is not allowed. You brought this, and it will tell you exactly what the custom rules are because it's fairly complex. So you can train in that and now become a customs border security or IRS representative.
So it's like hands-on training.
So it gives you hands-on training and specializes you in specific areas, yes, while not increasing the number of hours you take. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which when you first mentioned it, I don't know what it is blockchain. I've heard a lot about it. I've heard a lot. Even Nikki was trying to school me on blockchain a little bit earlier.
That was not good.
Yes.
So that was part of what your PhD was?
My PhD was actually in software engineering, specializing in cybersecurity. So I work with trying to protect computer systems from hackers and also designing systems that do that. But blockchain actually was developed by hackers, computer hackers.
Oh, wow.
And
awesome. So they did something good.
Yeah, so the idea, and we still don't know the actual gentleman who developed it. He goes by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. And he's a
arigato,
Mr.
Mr.
Satoshi
Roboto.
Nakamoto. One thing we know is he is extremely brilliant, and he's probably a professor. And some people suspect that he is a professor at Princeton.
Oh, that's funny.
Because, some people have tried to compare his writing with different writings of different professors.
Oh,
this seems to be the closest.
Yeah.
You could be Satoshi, but he says, hey, I'm not Satoshi. So no one really knows who invented blockchain. We know it is Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah.
And he is both an expert in finance and in computer science.
So he is Kaiser Soze.
Yes. Very, very smart. And the fact that we haven't been able to find him also shows he's really smart, because he has left a few trails, but you follow it and it leads to a dead end.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yes,
That's awesome.
But, and he presented a lot of works up to a certain point, and he said, guys, I have given enough information for you to build Bitcoin and everything. I'll stop. And he just stopped. And we had stock markets, and we had all these more complex treasury bills. And as a result, of course, society got to a point where they said, hey, we can no longer trust money in the hands of private individuals. We need to create an institution, a government institution that controls
the
this
government
money.
had to help us.
Exactly.
They had to.
So we created the Federal Reserve and the banking system.
Right.
And because of risks, we created the insurance system and all that. So all this became the foundation of money. Now, even transferring money, because if I can give you money faster, that is a service. Because now I say, okay, you're in California. Well, in order to pay you, we're going to ride a horse for 2 weeks to pay you, or drive a FedEx over there. So somebody started an electronic system of transferring money, but the charges were quite high, But people invented new ways of transferring money, which is cheaper, and blockchain. But there are so many issues with our financial systems. First of all, the speed of transfer of money. the risk, and with the internet, all the hacking, so all these things, and then international trade. Now you have, people buying stuff from China, then it takes so many days. So Satoshi Nakamoto came up with a system by which you could transfer money very easily. You could, and worse still, because he's a hacker, when you transfer money, you pay for the transfer, and sometimes you pay taxes too. So Satoshi Nakamoto came up with a system where you could transfer money and avoid things like taxes and so on. So now I don't say Bitcoin does that, but I know that there are systems in what we call the dark net, where people transfer money to each other with avoiding government detection and so on. So they developed highly sophisticated mechanisms and systems for transferring money, transferring value, and so on. So we on the white hacker side said, hey, you know what? These guys have developed technology which could be useful beyond what they're doing. So Bitcoin was formed as one of the very first blockchains. But beyond that, we realized blockchain can be used for so many things. It could be used for legitimate business. It could be used for cross-border trade. It could be used to secretly identify people. Or if I put a blockchain on my cell phone and I got stuck in a forest, they could identify me by location and so on. Because we developed all these technologies inside blockchain. It could be used for medical records. It could be used for a host of things. So people started developing blockchains which are actually useful and legitimate. But the technology...
So, let me ask you a question. So in its basis, is it a secure... Because I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
But I still don't understand maybe I don't understand the conceptualization of it. Is it bits of data that are protected from anybody else being able to see what that data is? Are they... So is it encrypted data?
Yeah,
Meaning,
yes.
does it have some computation that's associated with the data that has to be undone to be able to look at it?
Yeah. So there are four main characteristics to a blockchain. First of all, there is a group of people, maybe 1, 2, or 3, or millions, who all agree using what is called a consensus algorithm. To that we agree to this. Okay, so once once those people agree, then we have a cryptographic system, which only those who agree can access. In other words, we can exchange information. All the parties in there can exchange information secretly, and no one from outside can access that information.
Right.
Now, the third principle is that the information is immutable. That means you cannot change the information. So we put the information in blocks. So that block is immutable. It cannot be changed. If you want to change it, then you create another block that says the previous block has been changed. And you distribute that information to everybody in the blockchain.
Okay.
Yes. So by doing that, it is unhackable, because computer hackers depend on secretly accessing and changing information or transferring it. Yes.
Okay. So maybe let me repeat what you said. So as long as everybody knows what's going on at the same time,
yes,
and we all have the passwords, then there's no hiding the key from either any one of us.
Exactly.
And so hackers depend on being able to have the lack of that information when they're moving from place to place.
Exactly. Yes. So I'll give you an example. Supposing that I'll first give you an example of the current. All current systems are hackable. Why? Because not everybody knows all the information at the same time. For instance, people have gone home and the banks are closed, apart from security guards and whatever. Now, if I were a computer hacker, I somehow got the password of the bank manager. The bank manager has access to several things. They can transfer millions of dollars as part of the job, One bank may owe another bank, so they may transfer 2 million. Now, as a hacker, I transfer that money to my own account or to Mexico somewhere, and then I fly away. So that's what a hacker would do. Find privileged information in a system and use that information to do something that is wrong. But if you have a blockchain, that blockchain would say, well, we're about to transfer $2 million to Mexico. Peter, you agree with that? How about you, Tracy? How about...
No.
Said, no way, who is that? So the process would fail.
So
Yes.
everybody... Oh, that's awesome. There's no weak point in
There's
the
no
process.
weak point, yes. Because everybody in the blockchain would know
That's
it.
brilliant.
Yes, would know it. So that is...
So a hacker created a system
Yes.
around the system that
Yes.
they knew that they were working in.
Yes.
They were like, all right, guys, we got to at least have one thing that we can't mess up. So I got
Exactly.
this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
How interesting.
So that is the power of the blockchain, and if it is, and you can send very little information to confirm something. You don't have to send the entire transaction. Just, do we send the money to? No way, and that's it. It fails, and whoever tried to send that information can be tracked because since the information is immutable. He must have entered through some point, and we will find the point at which he entered and every movement he made. And he will have to create a new block to do that transaction because you cannot change the previous block. Yeah.
So
Are there any weak points at all?
Well, yes, there are still weak points. I'll tell a story of somewhere in India, somebody created a blockchain, and he created what we call a trapdoor, which means that he still had some secret access. Unfortunately, he died. And nobody had access to that trapdoor. And so all the people who were in that blockchain sort of lost
Their money.
Yeah, lost their money, yes.
Yeah.
So we need insurance on blockchain?
So there are several research areas. We need insurance. We need to have trust agencies that will have knowledge about that secret. It's like having a password system where only one person knows. Like, let's say there's a hospital with medical records and only one person has the master password. If that person died, nobody could access those records unless you hacked into the system. Now, several companies, and I don't want to say any names, several companies have master passwords so that, if anything happened, they could go back. So I think that's what we're trying to do.
So if I understand, Bitcoins really can't be stolen.
They can't be stolen, no.
Because it would send a message to everybody who's been associated with the Bitcoin. Do you agree that this person should have it? And somebody would say no.
Exactly.
And then they wouldn't have it anymore.
Exactly, yes.
So how interesting.
Yes. Now, there have been Bitcoin networks which have been hacked and stolen. Why? Because somebody created a false Bitcoin network and which claimed to be secure when it was not. There are always con men in the world.
Right.
Yes, they say this is a BMW, but it is actually not a BMW. They just looks like a BMW, and then you buy it and find out that's not real. But a real Bitcoin network cannot be hacked.
Right.
Yes.
So, to get back on some aspects of reality, you, because we've been in the computer world here for a little while. You teach at Albany State.
Yes.
You're head of the computer science department there.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's awesome. What a great resource. And so people who come through, so you can get degrees in computer science, and then I assume you tell them you need degrees in mathematics and computer science.
Yes.
So what your recommended path for people entering into your field is what? Or do you have a recommended? I mean, I'm sure you...
So we have two recommendations. You can get straight into the degree program if you come through high school with the appropriate SAT and so on, or you could start with the associate's program. And with the associate's program, you start with certain courses, and you could actually graduate, for instance, with an associate's degree in computer science. And with the Nexus, you could take these courses. For Albany State, the University System of Georgia has approved blockchain with machine learning, blockchain with data analytics. So you have those two Nexus degrees. And the blockchain with machine learning, you can go out and work in so many fields now, because everybody is trying to do machine learning and do blockchain. I'll give an interesting example. The Federal Aviation Authority is right now building sort of like, how are we going to have all these millions of drones flying all over the place?
Right.
What are the rules? And how do we determine the pathways so that there's no collision between drones or between drones and planes?
Planes,
and all
right.
that.
Yeah.
And
who cares if a drone falls down? Yeah. I just don't want to mess with my plane.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a complex thing, and they're going to employ thousands, if not millions, of people as drone pilots. There are already people who are getting drone licenses. So if you do blockchain and machine learning, and then you do drone science and get a drone license, you can earn $90,000. So that's already there, and it's just going to grow. So that's just one field that one could take. We have things like smart manufacturing, we have supply chain and logistics. All of them
Smart farming.
Smart farming,
Yeah.
yes. So all of them are using these technologies. And so a career in that path is available. And then in the areas of finance, there's a lot going on, which is also using machine learning. Yes, yes. And another field that is really, really growing with machine learning is all the industrial processes. So they're producing things cheaper, better, with better quality control, because machines are learning. A machine will tell you that I need to be serviced, or I need this part to be replaced because
right
yes.
I need my oil check.
Yes.
Why haven't you taken me down there?
Yes, the vibrations are a little too high.
Right.
Something is loose. The machine is telling you. So it's learning how, where, if it's operating efficiently, it learns. If the temperature goes, it says it's a little too hot, you need to check me out. So all that is part of machine learning. So there's so much, just so much. Yes.
Well, to bring it back to beauty, do you have, you go back to the golden ratio?
I want to ask you something else. Do you know anything about the, as far as the Italian mathematician with the sequence, as far as
Fibonacci?
Yes. It was rabbits? He was studying the reproduction of rabbits, right?
Yes. So actually, everything botanical is also mathematical. And that is so true. And Fibonacci, an Italian mathematician, predicted how many rabbits would be born over a period of time using what we call the Fibonacci sequence. Yes. And it is true. And when you do it mathematically. So if you are a rabbit farmer, it's a good thing to know about Fibonacci. Yes.
Use that for your spreadsheets.
Yes. And even the way trees and leaves grow, they use mathematics. And so you can predict. Actually, even in agriculture now, they use that to be able to predict what the height of corn will be,
that's incredible.
and how many leaves, and the rate at which the leaves will grow, because they all grow according to certain equations.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, the natural number E, which determines growth rates, was actually discovered by a biologist stroke mathematician. Yes. So we have, even when we look at the life of different plants and animals and insects, every single one of them has a natural growth rate, and at a point when it reaches maturity and begins to decline, it is all mathematical. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And that's actually been applied to cities.
Yes.
And larger structures is associated with those, and how they grow in relation to You can even look at things like how fast someone walks on the sidewalk, and then you can determine what the approximate population is. People in smaller cities walk slower.
Yes.
People in bigger cities walk faster.
Yes.
And so it's some bizarre relationship to how
Yes.
fast people move as to
Yes.
what that is. So this has been an awesome talk. We've reached about an hour, even though we were a little bit late. And so I really enjoyed it.
It
There's
was
probably
so
a
good.
bunch of other stuff we could have talked about, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we'll definitely do it again if you'll come back. Maybe yeah. So we were both busy. I was worried I was going to be late today. So and then I was sort of glad you were late.
Yes, it happened.
It's good.
Yes.
But thank you. Very good.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. Thank you so much.